Rules, the most important part of any board game. After all, it determines who wins and who doesn't. Today, we want to walk you through the rules of our game and explain to you why we made them the way we did.
What if we made our own board game?
First, you need to understand the context. Our game was created as a combination of few others, with a bunch of additions and innovations. The games that we based it on were chess, MTG, and the least known from all three, old and forgotten game called Feudal. What came out in the end was a game with chess-alike board, MTG-alike pieces, Feudal-alike rules, and a bunch of other things that we added on top of that.
Alright, let us show you how that is actually supposed to work.
Let's start with the board. Feudal's board was way too big, while chessboard seemed a little too small for the purpose of our game. Therefore, we decided to go with a manageable size of 8x12.
Why 8x12? We had a very simple and rather silly reason. It was the optimal size that could fit on our 3D printer plate.
Yes, we do want to print the game. And while that reason was rather trivial and the board was a subject to change, after a lot of playtesting we decided to keep the board.
You can also notice that the board has different colors and shades upon it, and no, it's not just to make it pretty, although it does look better this way.
Before the game, each player chooses a terrain, an element, the side that they want to be on. That idea came from MTG. The options to choose from are water, lava, forest, and mountain. Each element has its own specialties, but more about that later. What's important is that each of them has its own plate, which is half the size of the board.
If you were paying attention, you could also notice that each plate has 3 variations, almost like a gradient. And yes, that also has a reason. Those color variations are terrain densities. You have an intense color, which is a dense terrain, then less intense color, which in turn is less dense terrain, and then each plate has a road. In short, those densities affect where some pieces can or cannot go. It may slow down a piece or restrict any movement at all.
We took that functionality from Feudal. It has such a squares scattered up all around the board. We took the same idea, but in a bit more organized fashion, since our game needed to be more predictable for the true strategic play. Alright, so that's about all you need to know about the board. So now let's walk through how the game actually happens. In the event of both players playing with starter packs, meaning that they have pre-chosen armies, and yes, you can choose your own armies, just like a deck in MTG. The player that rolls the smallest number on the d8 starts the game by putting out one of the pieces.
Throughout the game, players take turns putting out pieces into the board. They can, but don't have to, put out 1 piece per game onto the board. On the same turn, a player can move as many pieces as the player wishes. You cannot move pieces that were just put out, unless the hex says otherwise.
One rule that binds all of the players is that they have to put out their royalty pieces first before they can move to any other pieces. Gameplay is quite similar to chess. You have to move your pieces and defeat the pieces of the opponent. The difference is that you can either kill or capture the pieces of your opponent. Killing permanently eliminates the piece. On the other hand, captured pieces can be exchanged, negotiated, fought back to bring them back on the board. The rules of negotiation are very simple. The players decide what works for them. The goal of the game is similar to Feudal. It's either to kill the royalty of your opponent or to capture their castle. Just like in Feudal, the castle has 2 towers, minor and major. To capture the castle, you have to enter through the minor tower and then proceed to the major one. Now that you know the general idea, let's move to the most interesting part of the game, the pieces.
The idea of the game was to give players a full freedom in choosing what pieces to play with and how many to have as your army. And yes, that idea came from MTG. We love the idea of building decks and then competing against each other. It promotes so much strategy and creativity that playing possibilities are almost endless. That's what we tried to include in our game too. When player chooses their terrain, they also choose the pool of pieces they can build their army from. Water pieces have one set, lava another, and so on.
Each element has its own kinks, a certain way to play it.
Water is meant to be more calm and strategic, lava more aggressive, forest more trickery, and mountain more defensive. Again, that part was very much inspired by MTG.
To make choosing the army a little bit easier, we decided to divide the pieces into 3 different categories.
4 units, no powers, just like chess pieces. Specialists, those are the ones with some cool movement abilities, usually based on those terrain gradients we talked about earlier. And mages, pieces with magic. Anything is possible here, from blowing up pieces across the board to being immortal. The idea was very intriguing. Pretty quickly, I made up a bunch of different pieces and cool abilities, and created 2 starter packs for water and lava elements. I didn't care much at this point about the fairness of the pieces.
How can you not care?
Like this.
We heard in so many places that playtesting early is important, so we couldn't afford losing time on lower level concepts like that. And yes, we made our first prototype out of paper. And honestly, it was quite enough to understand what works and what doesn't. We played multiple games and noted a few things. 1. The game was freaking awesome. It was very engaging and strategic, which honestly was all we could wish for. And second, the game was totally unfair. Water elements were definitely overpowering the lava, but at least that was a problem we could solve.
As you can imagine, building a deck is way harder to implement in a board game than it is in a card game. There's just so much more to consider. Movements, captures, interactions with other pieces, abilities, and so on. But of course, the fact that it was hard did not stop us from trying. Making this part of the game fair and functional was the hardest and most challenging part of implementing the game. After lots of variations and ideas, we decided on a strict rule that sort of fixed our problem. Each player gets 100 points to spend on their army, and each piece has its own value that it's worth. The rest is basically up to the players. That way, if the pieces have fair point values, no matter what pieces the player chooses, the strength of the army should be relatively the same. Another limitation we introduced is that there should be a certain percentage of core units, specialists, and mages. That also made it a lot more fair, since the army full of mages was overpowering the army full of core units by a mile. But of course, by resolving one issue, we created another one. How do we ensure that pieces have fair point values? What do you even base that on? Our own intuition? That doesn't sound right. Well, I'll tell you one thing. We did find the solution. But more about that in the next one. This is the funniest part, is like